We continue now with our special one-hour program with Dr. Matthew Spalding, professor over at Hillsdale College's Graduate School of Government here in Washington, D.C. We were just talking about this shift that we've seen in public education. And, there are a lot of parents out there, they love Hillsdale College. They love the spirit behind Hillsdale. They love the idea. Why do they have to wait for their kids to get to college, though, for a Hillsdale kind of experience? As we're moving more toward school choice, and as we see Corey DeAngelis is doing such great work crafting legislation with governors in certain states so that the money can follow the child to whatever educational choice is best for that kid, could we have little K-12 Hillsdales in this country?
Well, a short answer, of course, I have to mention, since you brought it in particular, is Hillsdale College actually has a lot of K-12 classical schools. We're very involved in this market now, some formally, some informally. We have a curriculum, K-12 curriculum that's used.
This is for homeschool parents to be able to use?
Homeschool parents can use it, but also there are charter schools around the country. We have somewhere in the upwards of 30 or so that are formally Hillsdale charter schools, and then another 50 or so that use our curriculum.
That's
so
great.
We're involved in that.
I love
market.
interviewing someone where I ask a question where I don't know the answer, and it's a great answer.
Years ago, we realized how do we the Hillsdale model of a college, and I think that model itself plays a role in the higher education debates that are going on. If you want to come back to that, but in the K through 12. How do we shape that? Because you're absolutely right. The education you get at the K through 12 level is going to determine your success at the college level. Right. Plus, there are a lot of people that don't necessarily go to college, and they don't need to go to college. It's not necessarily the end in all cases.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you need a good K through 12 system. So we got involved in that. And I think there are,
Professor, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I'm sort of taking for granted that everybody knows when I say the Hillsdale model or the Hillsdale way. There may be some people who don't know what Hillsdale is all about and how Hillsdale approaches their education. So could you give us a thumbnail?
Sure. Sure. Well, the college itself, it's an old college, founded in 1844. It's a liberal arts college. And it's really built on the notion, which we would broadly today associate with more of a classical approach, which is that there are great truths in our history and in the liberal arts, broadly understood, which is to read great books and great literature and great philosophical
but that's
writings.
all a bunch of old dead white men.
Well, it turns out that there are what we refer to as kind of the eternal verities. And whether you agree with them or not, and whether you think they apply directly or not today, the learning of that, the education one has by studying those things actually is very liberating, hence the term liberal arts.
Yes.
In its most important sense. What does that mean at the K through 12 level in terms of a curriculum? It means having a system that does, in many cases, something that's not controversial at all. You teach good math, you teach good reading and writing, you teach those basics very well. And in our schools, we teach our kids to read very early. It's not a problem. We teach them good math. And then on top of that, they read a lot of old books. They read about the Romans and the Greeks. They read about a lot of history and the things which we think actually kind of open the mind to thinking more broadly about the great questions of what it means to be human, how we should assess where we are, and to have this broad sense that one is prepared then for college education, whatever you might want to do. It's actually an education, if you think about it in general terms, this is the way education is supposed to be.
Right.
Indeed, this was the education before it became completely overthrown, if you will, by the modern progressive sense of merely educating by doing and ignoring the past. The modern approach is that there's nothing to learn in the past. It's all about the current, future, looking ahead. Yeah. So, for instance, if you think of the controversy over American history, something like the 1619 Project, this has come up before. This is nothing new. But what is it? It's looking backwards in history, based on an ideological debate right now. We're going to look backwards in history and find what we're looking for.
Right. So, you've already reached your conclusion based on the life you're living right now. So now let's go look for things in history that will validate.
So a classical approach to those questions and approach to history questions is no, we have an obligation to go and learn the history itself. Warts and all, it's imperfect. But what did they say? What did they think? What were they doing? And then assess them.
Right.
and give it its full due. And you learn history.
Yeah.
There really is nothing controversial about this when you really think it through. It's been made to be controversial on the idea that somehow we're putting something back in that wasn't there in the first place.
We often talk about these issues and classical education and the failure of our school system, often from the individual student's perspective. If it's your child, it's very personal to you because you want your child to have every opportunity to be able to expand their mind and fulfill what God intended for them. But this is actually a much larger societal issue, isn't it? And certainly in our constitutional republic, our democratic process doesn't function properly if we don't have an informed and educated electorate. And if they're all getting the same propaganda from our public government-run schools, they're not going to be that same well-rounded voter. So let's go in that direction, why this is important in terms of the future of our country with regard to individual citizens actually understanding our country, understanding our founding, and voting accordingly.
No, I completely agree. But let me make a very general comment first to put it in perspective. Modern liberalism, progressivism, their view of education is that what the individual is essentially an expression of their own will. It's whatever you want, whether it's pursuing your passions, your sexual passions, your gender. When you think of all the confusions around us, the modern liberalism thinks that actually is an expression of truth, and we must liberate that. So education must be liberating. That's the whole purpose behind it. A traditional view of education, which I would say is an education based on a proper understanding of what we are as human beings. What is man? What is what's the relationship between a parent and child? All of these things are really inherent in the nature of things. That view of education looks at it differently. We must start there, which is that the individual grows, which is why the parent-child relationship is so important for so long, but comes to a point where they can be self-governing. They can think for themselves. They've trained their mind that they can live their own lives. They can be self-governing individuals. That's what we're forming, but you have to begin with that understanding of what the thing is in the first place.
Sure.
But based on that, then the argument is that there are certain things one needs to know in order to be a self-governing individual. Well, in a republic, which is say in a system of government where you can be self-governing, you need to know something about the essence of those things themselves. The political system, the Constitution, the rule of law, but inherently these deeper, more fundamental things about you are a human being. You're not a fire hydrant. You're not a dolphin. You're not a helicopter. Right? There are certain common sense assumptions that we have somehow thrown to the side, that's really the root of the problem. Recovering those, I think, then creates a domino effect that will rebuild our educational system. And I think we're actually seeing the beginnings of that in the reactions of some of these parents objecting to very basic things in their children's education. That, I think, is the seed of what I see as a great optimism in education in our political future.
It could be the one good thing that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
The parents actually had to see what their kids were learning. We keep using the same phrase, you and I, republic, constitutional republic, our republic, how we should. Does it bother you to no end when you hear politicians, like, for instance, referring to January 6th as a threat to our democracy? They just throw it out there. It's like, this is our democracy and our democracy. We're not a democracy. And I'm not trying to be pedantic. I know a lot of people do that. But it is an important distinction that we are not a democracy. We use the democratic process to choose our representatives in our constitutional republic. That's intentional.
Right. No, and I agree, but we shouldn't get too technical about it, which is your point. But yes, the idea of a republic is very important, which is to say, writ large, we're a democracy. The people are sovereign, the people rule.
Yes.
But also, we recognize that the people are also driven by their immediate passions and other things, and somehow make decisions too quickly sometimes and overreact. And so those opinions are filtered, if you will. Not stopped, not prevented, but that sovereignty plays through the system. This again, of course, points back to the importance of the rule of law. Right. You want to have that opinion in the government, not merely day-to-day take over the government.
Hold that thought, because what's the point of having an educated electorate, and what's the point of having this democratic process for our constitutional republic if voting is rigged anyway? A lot of people really do believe that our system is so rigged that they don't have a voice anymore. Well, let's address that next with Professor Matthew Spalding on O'Connor Tonight.